Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Your Fave Film Critic, the podcast starring, hosted, produced, recorded by me, your favorite film critic, Dom Griffin. This is episode 12 of season 2 of the pod. This is our mid-season finale. I'm going to take a few weeks off before we get back to new episodes. This is gonna hopefully sort of be the end of the largely movie-less arc the pod has been on for the last few whatevers now. Unless while I'm on hiatus, again, I have some kind of weird like change of heart or something. Like as I'm recording this right now, it is April 11th. It's Thursday. It is Mercury's been in retrograde since the 1st. Today is the Mercury Kazemi, I believe. It's sort of like the halfway mark through retrograde. We're kind of getting past eclipse season. If you can't tell, I've been considering, I regularly add to the list of like potential brand shift grifts I could indulge in. And I've talked publicly a lot about how I think I'd be a great men's rights activist podcaster, but I can't really do that. But I do think I could give up on movies and comics and wrestling and whatever else and just become just an astrology grifter. I think over the last 2 years, I think I've learned enough about the craft that I think I could actually probably be pretty effective. It helps that I actually it's not like an irony thing. It started out as an irony thing, but I actually just genuinely do appreciate and I'm pretty fascinated by astrology, even though a lot of people think it's like the mark of the dumbest fucking person you know. And that might be unfair that maybe just you know a lot of dumb fucking people that like it, but I could see myself just like never sharing a public opinion about the MCU ever again, and then instead just like reading people's charts live on the air or something like that. I think I could be pretty good at that. That could be entertaining. If you're on the YouTube version of the pod, right, and you know your big three, put them in the comments below. I want to know the astrological makeup of my audience. And then if that doesn't work out, I don't know, maybe I'll become like a true crime guy. I'm not sure. I don't know. A lot of things in flux right now. So this episode is going to be, again, I didn't watch any movies this week. I didn't even kind of watch a movie. I did nothing movie related whatsoever. So I have a couple of news items to talk about. I'll talk about Wrestlemania week because that is like the bulk of what I've been watching a lot of wrestling this week, obviously. And then we'll talk about some comic stuff. And then I have one question at the end of the pod. So there's a very strong chance we'll have a bunch of wild tangents in between. You know how it goes, so, I just want to say, I guess before I get into it, thank you all for, joining me on this podcasting journey. This marks 36 episodes of the show we've done. And it just feels crazy because I don't know, it's just insane that it's just that many hours of just me talking and the people are just cool with that. I don't know. Maybe later in the year I'll try to mix it up. Maybe I'll do live streams or something. Maybe I can do an advice columnist thing. People can call in and ask for the last fucking human being you should be asking advice from. But I don't know. Well, there's so many places we can go with this. You know what I mean? There's so much ground we can cover, right? So yeah. Let's get started with the news. Okay. So, only two things happened that I feel like I can comment upon. Thing one is happened today. I guess OJ Simpson died, and I don't have a lot of opinions or thoughts or feelings about OJ Simpson. I just think he's such a fascinating pop cultural figure. I think it's interesting that there's a guy who was a hugely popular football player, and then acted a little bit, and then may or may not have committed double homicide, and then has just been a strange public curio ever since. So, whatever. R.I.P. to OJ, I guess. But it made me think about three key things. One is that like the Naked Gun movies, because like when I was a kid and I remember like the OJ trial and all the stuff going on, like I didn't know him from Swords, I just knew that he was in the Naked Gun movies, and I thought it was crazy that like the Naked Gun movie guy was on TV every day. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I don't even see Leslie Nielsen this much. And Leslie Nielsen's like more famous, I think, right? I mean, I don't know. At the time, I was like 8. I mean, when I was a kid, Leslie Nielsen was in the Naked Gun movies, and he additionally helped the WWF universe find the Undertaker at SummerSlam 1994. It was the first WWF pay-per-view I ever watched at my friend Roddy's house. We had Domino's, stuffed crust, pizza, and we watched the Undertaker return to fight the fake Undertaker. Who there was like 2 Undertakers and one wasn't real. And the build up to that big event was just a bunch of vignettes with Leslie Nielsen investigating what happened to the Undertaker. It was a different time. But the other thing I always think about OJ for is like Mike Medavoy, I believe, like the former CEO or studio head of, I can't remember what fucking studio he was in charge of, but he was a big like, movie producer guy, and he tells this story, and he wrote a book. I don't remember the name of the book. I probably should have just written these things down, but I didn't. He wrote a book, and he tells the story about how when they were making the first Terminator movie, and there were different people that they were talking about who was going to play the Terminator. You know, initially James Cameron wanted it to be Lance Henriksen. That was his plan for the Terminator. It wasn't going to be like a big muscle-bound guy. He was a cyborg. He didn't have to have muscles. But that Mike Medavoy had pitched making it OJ. Like at the time, like the juice could be the Terminator. And James Cameron didn't want to do it. And then eventually, you know, met Arnold, et cetera, and the rest is history. But for years after that, after OJ became synonymous with murder, James Cameron would constantly tell the story like, yeah, fucking Medavoy wanted me to make OJ the Terminator. And people would be like, oh, what a fucking dipshit idiot. And like, it's so fucked up that people would hear that story and then not stop and think like, this was like 10 years before the murder stuff happened. Like Mike Medavoy would have had no reason to believe that at a later date, that would be a problem to reconcile with OJ's public image. This is one of my favorite stories that like Mike Medavoy brings up in his book, that he was like, he's always bringing this shit up and it pisses me off. The people are like, what a fucking dummy. You wanted OJ to be the fucking Terminator? And he's just like, this is my fucking legacy. I don't know. It's funny. And then the other thing about OJ that's been stuck in my head all day is the People versus OJ Simpson, like the Ryan Murphy show or whatever, is like a really, really good show actually. And like Cuba Gooding Jr. is really good as OJ. But my favorite thing about the whole show is David Schwimmer's performance as Robert Kardashian, which is maybe one of my like top 5 favorite performances in television history. It is such a like interesting kind of like tragic turn in like in a show that is essentially like prestige trash TV. Basically, it's like really well produced and well made, but it's kind of trashy. And every scene that he's in, he's just like essentially OJ's most loyal friend and confidant and defender, you know, like he talks about OJ with this just sort of like this grace and this reverence of just like, it's the juice. Like, what do you mean? Like the juice couldn't kill anybody. He would never. And it, like their relationship is essentially in the show, it's like Superman and Jimmy Olsen. Like Robert Kardashian is OJ Simpson's Jimmy Olsen. Like that's my best friend. He gave me the signal watch. And I'd do anything for him. I'd die for him, and he'd die for me. Like he's very dedicated to OJ. And then the tragedy of the show is that the longer it goes on, the more he starts being like, oh wait, maybe OJ isn't who I thought he was. Great show. But someone made like a montage of every time David Schwimmer says juice on the show, which is a lot. And I've watched that video like 14 times today on my phone. Like I'd send an email at work, and then I'd have like a minute of just kind of like, and then I'd be like, let me get my fix. Let me watch the Juice compilation one more time, so I could work my way up to my next professional task. And it's art. It is the best thing ever. If there's one particular clip that like kills me every time, and it's not really technically funny, but it's very funny. Is OJ is like, you know, not wanting to turn himself in. He keeps threatening to like kill himself. And he ends up at Robert Kardashian's house, and he's just walking around the house with a gun like he's going to kill himself. And Rob has to keep talking him out of it. And it builds up to a scene where he's in one of his kids' rooms. And it's just Cuba Gooding Jr. sweaty and with a gun to his head. And it's David Schwimmer just going, Juice, not in Kimmy's room. Because it's Kim Kardashian. Like, a lot of the jokes of the show are the fact that Rob Kardashian is the patriarch of the Kardashian media clan. And I don't know why. I mean, it's a cheap, easy bit, but it kills me every time. Just like, not in Kimmy's room. David Schwimmer has been like famous for like years for Friends, and I guess he's pretty good on Band of Brothers. But his performance as Rob Kardashian is fucking incredible, and we should be talking about that all the time, including today. I know some people are like, well, OJ died. Let's honor his memory. No, let's talk about David fucking Schwimmer. Okay, let's talk about how this man. They should have given him like 17 Emmys or something. They should have been like, we're going to retroactively give you all of Jim Parsons Emmys. We're just going to take his. He has too many. It's enough is enough. It's your turn, Mr. Schwimmer. I fucking love that show. And if you've never seen the show, you should definitely see it. Everything on the show is good. Like Sterling K. Brown's really good in it. Courtney B. Vance, other people with first name, initial, last name, actor names. Good fucking show. Rest in peace to OJ. I guess he did it. I don't know if he did it. I read a pretty compelling theory that his son did it once, and I remember being like, "This is this sounds really sound. This sounds like this might be canon for me." But he's dead, and people are probably going to spend another 3 or 4 days making like progressively less funny memes about it. I saw a couple of funny ones. I have a feeling by the end of Friday it'll be like, okay, enough. Something else has to happen in the public eye. I don't want to think about these shitty, cheesy rent due tweets anymore. But yeah, R.I.P. OJ. The other thing is they dropped the trailer to Joker 2, aka Joker Folie à Deux, which I just want to pretend is purposely named after the Fall Out Boy album of the same name. I don't know if Todd Phillips is a big FOB head, but I want to believe that if this is a jukebox musical, that one of the songs will be Head First Slide into Cooperstown. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I mean, I'm just putting that into the universe now. I don't think they've locked a picture. There might still be time for Joaquin Phoenix to cover a Fall Out Boy song in the Joker sequel. The movie's going to make like $6 billion anyway. So, I mean, they can do what they want. Like, here's my thing about the trailer. I think it looks very pretty. I think that, cinematographer, I think it's Lawrence Sher, is that his name? Who shot like Garden State, and he also shot the first Joker. I think that he had a ball in the first film. I know he shot it using, I think, the Arri Alexa LF, I think that's the same camera that that James Laxton shot. What is the goddamn, it's a really pretty ass movie. If Beale Street Could Talk. James Laxton shot If Beale Street Could Talk, I believe, with the same camera that they shot Joker with, or predominantly shot it with. And I think Joker is just a really good looking movie. It's really nice to look at. I love stills from the movie. I think that I like the colors and the textures and a lot of that. But it's one of those movies where like everything interesting or palatable that is good about it visually is like, they become meaningless because the movie isn't really about anything, doesn't really say anything, and the visual's not really in service of anything. So it's one of those movies that's like, I don't really have anything against Joker. I don't think it's a bad movie per se. I just don't think it's very good. And I just think it's, I don't know, I guess like an exercise in aesthetics or something, but I am extremely excited for Joker 2, Joker Folie à Deux. Because once again, the movie does look quite good, in my opinion. But now Lady Gaga's in it as Harley Quinn. And this movie has so much potential, good and bad. It has the potential to be, the meme fodder it will create is generational. Like the number of social media posts that people in toxic relationships are going to make about how they are Joker and Harley. And I mean, every iteration of Joker and Harley inspires this, but something about taking like King of the Incels, Joaquin Phoenix Joker, and then just Lady Gaga, something about that mixture. I don't know how they could make it a more potent, like the only way this could become more potent is if like Ryan Gosling was Joker, you know? It is so extremely, he is literally me, cinematic Sigma universe coded. And I think it's going to be such a magnificent internet thing. I think so much of what's going to make this movie matter is just the weird shit that's going to come out of it, both ironic and insincere. It has the potential also, I think, to be a fascinating movie, like a genuinely interesting movie, just because I don't think Todd Phillips is like that interesting a filmmaker at all or whatever, but something about a guy making a movie like this, that's like an R-rated, weird Scorsese pastiche about a supervillain, and making $1 billion, is that like he gets another one. He gets to do whatever he wants. There's nothing he could say that he wants to do with this movie that Warner Brothers would go, no. Like, as long as he and Joaquin are on the same page about it, and like Joaquin's getting paid an absurd amount of money, like they can do whatever the fuck they want. So the idea that he was like, I want to make it a musical and I want Lady Gaga in it, like, to me, that makes me feel safer that like he at least recognizes the position he's creating from and is going to like go hog wild with it. Now, he might possess a limited imagination, and this might end up being just super mid, but the fact that it's a jukebox musical about Joker and Harley Quinn falling in love and whatever simulacrum of Gotham or Arkham Asylum is, that to me is enough. Do you know what I mean? Like the idea of like, how can we diversify this brand? We've already cornered the market on a certain kind of male viewer who has decided this is their worldview, the eyes of this character of Arthur Fleck. What if we crossed over with the femcel delegation? What if we got all the little monsters in on this? What if we got some of like Pop Stan Twitter involved? Like it's like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters to me, the idea that you're like gonna mix Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, and then like Lady Gaga. Like, I fucking love Lady Gaga, first of all. I'm a huge fan. I was heartbroken when she didn't get an Oscar for House of Gucci. Genuinely heartbroken. I hope she gets one for this. I don't even care what else comes out this year. It would just make me very happy for her to get an acting Oscar and for it to be for this movie. I am fully prepared to ironically defend this movie if it does suck, just because I think it's going to be an entertaining thing to do this fall. But I'm just very fascinated. I think the trailer looked like there's some nice shots in it. It looks neat. That bit at the end that a lot of like people who don't watch a lot of movies are mind blown by, with Joaquin behind the glass, and then she draws the smile and like that whole little bit of business at the end of the trailer. I get that it's like baby's first movie, impressive thing for certain people, and some people are gassing it up too much, but I really liked it. I thought it was like a cool little bit, and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, for like a faux art house movie about a fucking Batman villain, like this is I get that people are so excited to tear the movie down because some of the people that really defend it and exalt it are quite insufferable. I get it, but it's like, look, I don't think this is a big deal. Like, I don't think it's anything to get that worked up about, like, I think it'll probably be watchable. I think it'll be interesting. I imagine it's going to be very on the nose and just very overt and very obvious, but I'm hoping that it has some kind of sort of strange crackling off-kilter energy to it as well. Like, just Lady Gaga's presence will, imbue it with a certain amount of chaos energy. Or it might be dog shit. It might just be fucking dog shit, but like, I don't think it can be worse than the first movie, in the sense that I imagine they'll just be very similar in quality, but in different directions. I did see the blurb or whatever where Todd Phillips was saying that Joker's bisexual, and I saw some people already being like, oh no, they're woking the Joker. I don't even know if that was a real quote or not. I didn't like look deep enough to see if that was like a bit that someone did. But I did like the joke of someone saying like, playing the long game by getting like every lonely underfucked man on earth to like relate to the Joker, and then being like, and also he likes dick too. Like, such a psyop, sort of. I think that's actually pretty fascinating. I'd love if that just becomes a bit for the movie, that every interview Joaquin's like, yeah, we don't really explore it on screen, but he really, really wants to fucking Eiffel Tower someone. He really wants to Eiffel Tower Harley with Bruce Wayne, potentially. I don't know. Like, there's so much terrible fan fiction and erotic art that could come out of this. Most of it, I imagine, AI generated. So, that'll all be kicking off right around the election, I think, too. Like, the movie comes out at the end of October, so like the post shit from that movie it'll be an interesting, I think, psychic time, like the psychosphere of Earth, of America, is going to be in an interesting place. Fall 2024. It's pretty exciting. That's the news. I don't have anything. That's the news. That's what happened this week. Fuck. All right, so let's talk about what I watched. And what I watched was Wrestlemania. It was Wrestlemania weekend. I talked about this last week. Every day this weekend, there was wrestling. There was wrestling everywhere. It was wrestling. I'm super fucking wrestlinged out. Before I get into it, I want to plug that I was very honored to get to be a guest on this week's new episode of The War Report, one of my favorite RNC radio podcasts, hosted by my friend Cyrus and Quan, aka The Comeback Spot. The War Report has long been a wrestling podcast about the Wednesday night war between NXT and AEW's Dynamite when NXT was still coming on Wednesdays. It continues to be a show about those two shows, for the most part, but they've expanded the scope of what they cover, whatever. I got to go on, and I was asked to join to talk about the released footage of CM Punk and Jack Perry getting into a scuffle back at AEW All In last year. That was released last night on Dynamite. But I also went on to talk about WrestleMania and NXT Stand and Deliver and just like all things wrestling from this past week. And it was a lot of fun. I love those guys. It's always fun to talk to them. And it is currently available for Patreon subscribers. I believe it'll go to the public either by the time this episode comes out or maybe the day after. So I'll link it in the description. If you're not a Patreon subscriber for the A Show, you should be. It's like my favorite pod thing on the internet, honestly. Like I love the A Show. I love War Report. I love just the entire community that they really built up together. It's like my personal haven on the internet as a person who likes wrestling. It is the only place I ever really feel safe or comfortable talking about wrestling other than this podcast. And I had a great time with the guys. So I don't want to end up repeating everything that I said on that show. So if you want more of what I'm about to talk about, I would definitely suggest listening to that. But I will go over some stuff that I don't think I talked about on the pod with them last night. Okay, so I took the weekend off from work. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. I just watched wrestling for days. And I read some stuff, and I'll talk about that later. But I thought this was... Oh, I'm fucking yawning on air. What a prick. I thought this was... Why am I laughing? I thought this was maybe the best WrestleMania ever. I mean, that's probably severe recency bias, but in terms of WrestleManias, I like a lot. WrestleMania 10 is really good. WrestleMania 17 is really good. I think 30 and 31 are both pretty good. And then I really enjoyed 38, which I was at. I was at 38. And last year, 39 I thought was also very good. But 40, WrestleMania XL, the 2-night doubleheader event, might be the most satisfying WrestleMania ever. Because the entirety of the show, everything about the show, hinges on and is based around whether or not Cody Rhodes is going to get to finish the story. We talked about this in other episodes of the podcast, that this has been a big phenomenon. Cody Rhodes, babyface, trying to win the WWE title, a title his father held for 5 minutes in Madison Square Garden, but never fully won and had it ripped from his hands. This great story that's been in the making for decades or whatever. And this big rematch from last year's WrestleMania main event of him finally getting the chance to dethrone Roman Reigns, the longest reigning world champion of the modern era, is like this big epic thing. And like every year WrestleMania is pitched as being like the biggest WrestleMania ever. This is the biggest main event ever. That's how it works. There are definitely years where they could more reasonably go, this is up there, I guess. This is top 20. You know what I mean? Like there's fucking 40 of them, okay? They're not all going to be the greatest thing ever. But this one actually really stuck the landing, lived up to the hype, whatever you want to say. Like I've been saying to people, like they landed the plane. You know, this has been like like the last couple of years of WWE storytelling has all been kind of building up to this. And there's been a lot of twists and turns and a lot of like shifts and stuff. It's not like this was like some, everything set in stone type of deal. It's like any television show you watch. Like maybe the showrunners know how they're going to end the series, but they go on all sorts of excursions to get there. And like, this is the most satisfied I've been by something serialized in a long time. Like, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but I would definitely put it up there with like the end of Better Call Saul, the end of Succession. Only both of those things are very bittersweet and kind of fucked up endings, whereas this is like an actual honest to God happy ending, and it was a triumphant thing. And like I said on the War Report, I don't think there's another babyface good guy winning a title moment in my lifetime, in my 37 years on Earth, that felt as good as this did. And like, not even like when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, when like Diesel won the WWF title at a house show that I was not at, but I saw it recapped on Raw because it was an 8-second match. That was pretty cool. I like Diesel a lot, and him winning the title was really cool. When Shawn Michaels won the title at WrestleMania 12, the boyhood dream has become a reality. I guess that got kind of emotional about that because I was like 10. And then I guess when Sting beat Hogan, when the NWO stuff was going on, I thought that was pretty cool. Then I guess I don't think I really popped hard for like a big title win till like Punk winning at Money in the Bank the first time was really cool. Bryan Danielson, formerly Daniel Bryan, winning at WrestleMania 30 was a big deal, I guess. But none of it hit like this. None of it was built the way this was. This is a kind of perfect three-year arc of Cody Rhodes returning to WWE in 2022 at WrestleMania 38, and then main eventing the next year at WrestleMania 39, but losing, and then coming back this year for a rematch and winning. There's never been a 3-year arc like that. Like, the other trilogies, like Roman and Brock had multiple main events, but they were never of this caliber. Stone Cold and The Rock had 3 main events, and they also were not, I mean, they were like years apart too, and like it's 15, 17, and 19, and they're all very different stories. So that's not the same. I guess you could say the like Shawn Michaels Taker thing, like there was like 2 years back to back, like that's pretty whatever, but even that, I don't think anything touches this. And I'm not saying that I guess that doesn't mean it's like the best of all time in everything in all of wrestling, but it's up there. And I know some of this feels like recency bias, but I still think years from now, people are going to look back at this as being like, that was a big deal. They really built to this. It really worked. They landed it. It made everybody really happy. It made a shit ton of fucking money. It sold a bunch of fucking t-shirts and fucking dolls and stuff. And people were happy. I think that's, I cannot overstate how over the last several years, in the media and popular culture, a lot of people have tried to tell feel-good stories. Like, the people need heroes, they need happy endings, and I feel like a lot of people have not successfully provided meaningful, believable happy endings, ones that feel earned, let's say. I feel like the most comparison this has been getting is the Infinity War Endgame thing. Like, last year was like the Infinity War, this year's like Endgame. And I think this is even bigger than that, in the sense that, like, you know, I feel like this is just more satisfying and more consistent and more everything. WrestleMania Night 1 was really good. There were some good matches and stuff. It wasn't as, the last couple of years since WrestleMania has become a 2-night event, Night 1 always like overachieves, you know, and then Night 2 ends up being good, but you're like, but Night 1 was better. This year it felt more like a much more solid kind of rising action, and that like Night 2 was on a completely different level. It opened up with an incredible match and angle and bit of Drew McIntyre beating Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship, and then getting his comeuppance and having the title taken from him from Damian Priest because he got blindsided by his hatred of CM Punk. And it was so well done. That opening of the show was so good. And then almost everything in the middle was pretty good too. I loved the Bayley Io Sky match, was really quite good. But the main event with Roman and Cody have such incredible in-ring chemistry together. They're perfect together. And all the run-ins and the twists and the turns, and just it built to this great crescendo. And then Cody being hoisted up with all the baby faces in the ring, holding together. You have to understand how rare this is. In WWE, one of the things that was always a really big criticism throughout, I guess, like the Cena years, was that like Cena was such a top baby face and the big hero main character guy that whenever he would get jumped or outnumbered or whatever, he never had real friends on the show. Like, Cena did not have friends. There were people he would reluctantly team up with or people he would side with, but it was always rotating nobodies. And in general, for a long time now, wrestling has not had a babyface and then other babyfaces they're aligned with in some way. The closest I think you can get is like in New Japan. They have, in New Japan Pro Wrestling, people are mostly in like stables, like big groups. And for the longest time, like Hiroshi Tanahashi, like their top babyface, he didn't have his own stable. It was just Tanahashi, and then whatever baby faces are left and unaffiliated in other stables would be part of like what they called like the New Japan Army, I think. And whenever good guys needed help, Tana would be there to help them. And if he needed help, they would be there to help him. And it was usually Tana and like 4 guys nobody gives a fuck about. So it was a little bit different. But I remember throughout the kind of the end of the Cena era, you would read people recapping the show and they would always be like, why is Cena getting jumped by these 4 people and fucking no one is helping him? Or when someone helps him, it's like some second string nobody person that you don't believe in. Throughout this past year, they did an amazing job of building the idea that Cody's the main character of the show. He's the hero. He's the person we're rooting for. And he made friends. Like, he made connections. He made allies. He argued for people. He like brought them together. And it really feels like how Superman is in the Justice League, how Captain America is in Avengers stories. It's like, I don't want to say it's never happened in wrestling, but not in the last 20 years, at least. It was a very unique thing to me. So when the show ended, they've done, this is not a new thing. Like a new babyface champion is crowned and all the other babyfaces come out and celebrate with him and hoist him on their shoulders. Like that happened at the end of WrestleMania 10 with Bret Hart. But when Bret Hart came out and that happened, it was like, here's Macho Man, here's Sparkplug Bob Holly, here's a handful of people. And like, there was no kind of like real thing to that. It was just like a bunch of babyfaces are cheering with him. This felt like everyone in the ring was like connected to his story. Like him and CM Punk have this kind of begrudging respect for each other. Him and John Cena kind of get along because Cena kind of passed the torch to him via handshake. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, were a part of his struggle with the bloodline. Jey Uso and him are like, were briefly partners. Him and Seth Rollins have this like enemies to buddies kind of arc, like this sort of Vegeta and Goku vibe going on for them. And like Seth was instrumental in Cody's win, and the psychology of the whole story is sound. It all feels very like elemental and mythical and grand, and it was just really good, man. Like it made me feel really, really good. And like a lot of media doesn't do that. It's so rare to read anything that's like positive or upbeat. A lot of stuff is all about like continuing the story, kicking it down the road further. A lot of stuff is about milking things, which the WWE does quite a bit of. But it felt like, hey, we've been promising you this. It felt like a moment of healing. I know that sounds maybe a little bit like I'm being sarcastic, but I really did feel like Cody winning the title, whatever you even feel about Cody. I mean, a lot of people I know aren't even huge fans of him necessarily. It's just like, man, this is like what wrestling really needed was like a hero to rally around and root for and to celebrate. And when Cody left the company, he was kind of like a mid-card guy with kind of like an edge, like a creative edge to him. And then he went to the Indies and had to rebuild himself or whatever. And then he created this kind of persona around himself. But while he was in AEW, it was like the things he's good at were not beneficial to that company and what that audience wanted. They don't like white meat baby faces. They like edgy tweener characters and stuff. So the idea of one good guy who sticks to his guns and all that stuff, people think it's corny. It's like when people talk about Superman, they're always like, oh, it's so boring. He's so powerful. He's so nice. He should kill people. I want to see him fucking murder people. That would be cool. That kind of ideal. And I think that what's so amazing to me, the thing that I'm the most impressed by and happy about, is that Cody Rhodes woke up one day and figured out no one is doing this one thing. I know how to do that. I'll just fucking do it. He woke up in AEW. He wasn't going to renew his deal. They weren't going to pay him what he really wanted. He realized I can do exactly what I'm fucking doing here in front of way more people, and we can make way more money, and it'll actually fucking connect. And it worked. At WrestleMania 38, when Cody debuted, it was a big surprise. Like, he was like a surprise person. No one's ever re-debuted at WrestleMania quite like that. we all thought he was going to come and like get clowned, you know, like this guy had like done so many dramatic things in AEW that were anti-WWE. You know, he like, after his first big match, he like smashed a throne that looked like Triple H's throne with a sledgehammer, Triple H's like weapon. It was just like very like childish sort of We're at War type shit. So everyone just assumed if he signed that part of it was just gonna be him eating crow all year. Like, okay, we'll sign you back, but you're gonna fucking kiss the ring all the time. But in that match, his first match with Seth Rollins that we were there for live in Dallas, there's a part of the match where he's like doing tribute stuff to his dad, like the bionic elbow and everything. And the crowd was reacting in a way that felt very crazy to me at the time. It was very unnatural almost. And I remember looking at my friend Justin, co-host of the show, and Justin and I looking at each other just kind of being like, is he going to win this fucking match? Because we assumed he wouldn't. And then he won the match. And none of us were big Cody fans. I mean, none of us hated the fucking guy, but he was like a joke for a while. He was like a guy you made jokes about, that like he was this like second generation wrestler, like very knowledgeable, but it felt like he was just LARPing when he left WWE. It felt like he was a guy with money who was just like going to fantasy camp or something. In those moments, it was like, oh, he actually knows what he's doing. He has a really good mind for this, and he knows what the business kind of needs. And ever since, he just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just think I know people kind of look at it from the terms of like, oh, well, he bet on himself and he was right. Now he's a star. It's like, I don't think it's just that. I think it's like, and whatever it is that you do, especially when it comes to just like stuff on like social media or like content creation, whatever, a lot of it is like, okay, what is no one else doing that you can do? Only you can do. Only you have the potential to do. Do that, and then it'll become a special thing, and in general, people will like it, right? There are other people who are better at a lot of things in wrestling than Cody Rhodes. He's not the best guy in ring. He's not the best guy on the mic. He's not the best look. He's not the best. None of those things. But he figured out that John Cena is essentially practically retired, and that none of the baby faces who've taken his place are really that type of baby face. It's like they need someone to fucking, as Batista once said, kiss babies and hug fat chicks. Although I don't think I've seen Cody hugging any women at all, really, let alone, really pretty big ones. But like, that was like a thing. It's like, you have to be the kind of the politician, kind of like the good upstanding person. And he was like, I can fucking do that. And like, he kind of makes it seem like it's not even hard. Like, everyone knows that being like the top babyface of WWE is a hard job. You do constant media stuff. You're always getting up at like the crack of dawn to go do radio and TV and whatever. You're always going to signings and Make-A-Wish. Like, it's a lot. It's exhausting. Cody makes it look like it's no big deal. Even when Cena was at his peak and was really good at it, you could tell it was tiring for him. You could tell it was like wearing on him. It's only been a little bit, so maybe it'll be the same for Cody. But Cody just seems like he's like, oh yeah, this is easy. I've been doing all this shit all wrong. And I think it's beautiful that his story is like, my dad's like one of the biggest, most successful, most influential wrestlers of all time, and my older brother, the natural Dustin Rhodes, is 6'4". When his first year as a wrestler seemed like a veteran, he just took to wrestling so naturally. And here's me, and I'm like younger, and like I'm awkward. I'm not the same kind of athlete. I don't have the same kind of look. I don't have the same kind of natural ability. I have a fucking lisp. Like, everything about him was like, he should be sort of like the dark, the black sheep or whatever of the Rhodes family. And instead, he's now big. He's like the biggest star they've got. I mean, I don't know if you can really argue he's bigger than Dusty, in the sense that like Dusty was over in a very specific way for a very long period of time at a different time in the business. So I'm not going to go there necessarily, but Cody's overperformed. He's overachieved for what people ever thought he was going to be. Even when he was a mid-carder and I liked him and I saw potential in him, I never saw this. I thought, well, he'll be like a 1B, 1C top babyface guy. Someone else will get injured and he can be the top guy. Not what he is now. This is a huge star. And I don't have a lot of like, I don't even want to bother getting into other stuff that happened in WrestleMania or stuff that happened in Raw the night after or anything else. That story to me was just so good. I literally changed my phone's lock screen to Cody Rhodes with the belt. I don't think I've made my phone's lock screen a professional wrestler ever. My Apple Watch's face is for a while has been CM Punk photoshopped to look like a bad bitch. He has like hoop earrings and like bad bitch nails and like But otherwise, I don't really put pro wrestlers on whatever. But I was like, you know what? I don't know how long this is gonna last, but I feel it's a good feeling. It's like, I guess for people like sports, like if there's a team you really care about, or you get into caring about, and they win a championship, it feels like you won the championship. And I'm just excited to see what comes next. You know, I did watch some non-WWE stuff. I watched a couple of some the GCW like indie shows. I kind of half watched them. I watched a little bit of Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor. There was some stuff on there I liked. It took me a while to track down, but I did watch Bryan Danielson got to main event a CMLL show in Arena, Mexico, one of his lifelong goals. And he had a really good match with Blue Panther, legendary luchador. I thought it was a really, really beautiful match. And at the end, there was this really great little moment where like Danielson's like trying to speak Spanish. He's like very bad at it. And he's basically just, you know, telling the crowd and Blue Panther that he's like his idol, like one of his heroes. And he gets on his knees to like bow to him. And it's like this really beautiful moment. And then Blue Panther seems almost a little shocked, like not in a bad way. He just seems kind of like, oh, well, what? Okay. And he helps him back to his feet to kind of be like, don't be on your knees. Hey, get up. And then he walks him over to the corner to like, hey, you know, you won the, you go, smile and stuff. And Brian gets to the top of the ropes to like, you know, gesture to the crowd, and Blue Panther puts him on his shoulders and just walks him around the ring. And it was just such a really beautiful thing. And it just reminded me that like, that's the stuff. I love pro wrestling. I love matches. I love when someone gets hit with a clothesline so hard, they like go inside out. I love when people like just get kicked in the face. I love when people jump off of the top rope and put people through tables. I love all that stuff. Okay. But I really love the emotion. I really love the storytelling and like the triumphs and stuff. And like, this is a good weekend for that. It was a good weekend for that. And it was really special. And I'm really excited about it. You know what? I had like a whole other set of notes to talk about AEW and that CM Punk footage and stuff. But I talked about some of that stuff on the War Report, and I don't want to, I have a lot of negative feelings about that stuff, and I don't want to put that on the pod today. I don't want to do it. So I'm just not even going to talk about it. But yeah, that was WrestleMania weekend. Cody Rhodes is your undisputed WWE champion. He went from undesirable to undeniable and now undisputed. Even though there is another world champion in the promotion, he is undisputed. Fuck it. And that's nice. We don't get a lot of wins in this world. So let's talk about what I read. Like I said last week, I was already kind of burning myself out on comics because I've read so many. But this week I ended up rereading a lot of stuff, which I sometimes, it's like a nice comfort thing to do. It's just like, I've read this series a bunch of times. I'm going to reread it. And you can kind of skim it too, because like you've read it a bunch of times. So you can just read your favorite parts or whatever. But what started this for me is that I found on the like Internet Archive or whatever, someone uploaded a bunch of scans of Wizard magazine. Wizard, the greatest comics magazine. It was a magazine I read a lot as a child. And I think they stopped, whatever. I started reading Wizard around issue 71. And then I think they stopped publishing it around like 220 or something like that. So I downloaded like just every issue from like 55 or 60 to the end of the series. And then I also got a couple of issues of Toy Fair, their spinoff that was just about toys. And I got a couple of issues of their specials, Wizard Edge, which was a spinoff of the mag that they published occasionally that was aimed more at the independent and small press and like underground comics market, like just anything that didn't have capes, which I thought was good. Because I started publishing those around the time that I started to like expand my taste away from superheroes. So that was kind of cool. But man, I forgot. There's something very specific I loved about reading Wizard when I was a kid, which was that when I was a kid, I think a single issue of a comic was either $1.95 or like $2.25 at the time. And then an issue of Wizard magazine, I think, was like $3.99 or $4.99. And an issue of Wizard was like 160 pages or something. And there would be previews of other comics, reviews of other comics, news stories, interviews, price guides, rankings, all sorts of speculative stuff about the comics market, all sorts of shit, you know. And as a, you know, like if I couldn't always afford to go to the comic book store. I couldn't always go buy actual floppies and stuff, but like, or I didn't start buying trade paperbacks probably till I was like 14. So I could always go to like Rite Aid or something and spend, you know, whatever, $5.17 with tax and get a new issue of Wizard magazine. And the magazine very often came like polybagged, so you couldn't just read it in the store. I mean, you could rip it up and read it in the store. You know, what the fuck are they going to do to you? But like, you know, it was the sort of thing you'd want to take home. And for the price of 2 floppy comics, basically, or 2.5 floppy comics in some cases, you were getting so much. And like, you know, now we have the internet, so you can just read you could read Bleeding Cool, you could read Comic Book Resources, you could read whatever, all at your fingertips. So back then, I mean, there were websites, but like, you know, when I was young, I was only going to the computer lab to like Google, you know, Goku Super Saiyan 7 and shit like that. I wasn't really like on the internet and you know, occasionally looking at like pornography, I suppose. And like Googling movie facts or whatever. That was like child me on the internet was just like Goku, Minka, the Titanic titted Asian porn star, and just like IMDb type shit. You know what I mean? Just like finding out about old Ingmar Bergman movies or whatever. So that was me at that age. And Wizard was like this really cool thing of like, in a way, Wizard felt like the internet, but in like a small package. Because you would find out all these like upcoming news about stuff. You'd find out what creators were leaving what books, who was maybe taking over, what artist had what beef with what editors, what type of, you know, what kind of rare baseballs Todd McFarlane had bought recently. Rereading all these issues, it was fun because I was reading them kind of haphazardly and out of order, just based on the covers, if I remembered that owning that issue physically or not. And there were a couple of different things I started doing. One was like checking every issue would have the top 10 writers and artists. And I had a game I used to play with myself every time a new issue came out, which is that I would look at the top 10 writers and top 10 artists, and I would go through one by one and see if in any of the cases at the time, the number 1 writer and the number 1 artist ever worked together, or the number 2 and the number 2, the number 3 and the number 3, and so on. And I would like, a new issue would come out and I would pick a number and I would go, okay, 4. I think 4 of these pairings will have actually produced comics together. And sometimes it would be more, sometimes it would be less, and you'd lose the game. But it was fun redoing that game a bunch of times. Now, when like 20 more years have passed, and in some cases, people that had not worked together at the time have worked together since. And then also, like, if you would be wrong, you know, if you would look and go, oh, okay, well, I guess Garth Ennis and, you know, Alex Ross never worked on a book together, you would go, well, what kind of book could they work on together? Like, what would they do? What kind of book would that look like? And it's just like a fun speculative thing if you're into superhero comics and stuff. And it was real fun, man. It was really enjoyable. And like, I also, a lot of different weird like things would pop up. So it was like, since I was reading the issues and skipping around, I would see stuff like, everyone, Mark Silvestri is leaving Image Comics. He's taking Top Cow away from Image. And then I pick up another issue and it's like, Top Cow has rejoined Image Comics, and it's like 6 months have passed. Or, you know, Mark Waid, in almost every issue I read, was either getting fired off of a book or returning to a book or being embattled with an editor on a book. He was like the CM Punk of the late 90s comic book scene. And it would just be really fun. There used to be really good interviews back in the day. Not to say that no one does good interviews with comics creators now, but I think that some of the Wizard magazine interviews were exceptionally good, and they hold up really well, and they're very interesting. And I feel like people were less guarded back then, maybe. I don't know if it was because there was a smaller audience who read that sort of thing, but like, people were just much more open about being like, yeah, I don't fucking know why they're taking me off this book. We've been doing good. We're doing these numbers. Whereas today, people are like, oh, it was just creative differences. We'll work it out later. And then you have to find out through the whisper network of what the real beef was. Back in the Wizard days, the real beef was just out there. You know, it'd be like, hey, we heard that so-and-so's doing this because they're mad at this guy. And it was, so some of the dirt stuff was pretty funny. But then you also get stuff like reviews of books. And it's like, in some of the issues I read from like 95 to 98 would have stuff like reviews of the first couple of issues of Preacher. You know, it was just remembering that, like, you know, Preacher was not always a finished classic on the shelves that people just pick up. It's like some of these books were coming out as is, like at that time. Like, I remember one of the issues I read was like issue 3 of Kingdom Come had just come out, and I never thought about Kingdom Come as anything other than a complete book in a very long time. So that stuff was interesting to see how they were received at press time and stuff like that. Some things about it were a little bit weird, obviously, because you start to realize how much of the humor, one, how much of the humor was like formative to me, but then two, how much of the humor was like, oh, you could make these jokes today, and not in the kind of like triggered woke whatever. I just mean that like some of the stuff was like weirdly insensitive and not like mean spirited either, but just sort of like, oh, this is just kind of how things were, you know. And yeah, there was just a lot of, it was really fun. It was, I don't know, it was my big comfort thing this week was just like, I miss when I was a kid, I miss walking to the 7-Eleven near my house, which was situated next to a Domino's, and getting like a really big like Slurpee, and then getting like breadsticks from Domino's, and somehow that was a meal. And then coming home and reading the new issue of like JLA, or when Ron Mars was writing Green Lantern, and like Kyle Rayner had first become the Green Lantern, or whatever fucking garbage Scott Lobdell was doing on the X-Men in his final years, and reading Wizard, and just thinking about other books I was going to read later. You know, like the thing about Wizard was you could window shop a lot. You could think about all the comics you would read or you would check out, or, you know, as a adolescent boy, all the different just like horny shit that was happening in the comics industry at the time, where like so many books were coming out that were essentially porn, but with more like swords or whatever. And I don't mean like, just sort of like Frank Frazetta, caveman, loincloth type shit. I'm talking about like every Top Cow book. Just like Witchblade, every one of these books. It's like, what is this book about exactly? Look, the main character has huge titties, and there's some kind of magic artifact that covers up her titties, but just barely. And everyone wants to kill her, and she has to fight them with no pants. And then reading interviews with the people creating those books being like, yeah, this is a really interesting story that we're telling. And it's like, are you really going to pretend to me that you don't know that you're making softcore pornography? Okay, fair enough. And then going to a comic book store and like lingering at those areas of the store, and the guys looking at you being like, you're 12, you can't have this, and being like, fine, I'll take this fucking issue of Teen Titans, I guess. Fuck, I'll see what Robin's up to. And it was just a really cool walk down memory lane, I guess. I don't know. I love Wizard. I've essentially reread the entire fucking every magazine that they've put out now, and I'm a little bummed that I blew through them that way. But it did lead me on a little bit of a trend of stuff that I ended up doing, which was that I did read some comics. So one of the things was I reread Identity Crisis, which is a DC book from, I think, 2004. It was written by Brad Meltzer, not to be confused with completely unrelated Dave Meltzer, the wrestling journalist. Brad Meltzer was a novelist, and I think he was a lawyer maybe. And he had taken over Green Arrow for DC when Kevin Smith left, and then that was his first comic. And then his second comic was Identity Crisis, this huge event using the Crisis name, which is usually reserved for big universe-shattering stories that DC tells over like 5 to 10 years. Identity Crisis is not like that. It was just like a murder mystery set in the DC universe. And in the story, Elongated Man's wife, Sue Dibney, is murdered, and everyone has to figure out who did it. And other loved ones of superheroes are being targeted. So it's like, is it a serial killer? What's going on? And the book was very successful. It sold a lot of copies. It was very controversial because so much of the book is like kind of in the faux Watchmen vein of dragging Silver Age superhero iconography down to reality, like where there's like murder and like rape and violence and stuff. And the final reveal of the killer is like sucks. Like all these years later, it's still kind of bullshit. But there's so many good things in Identity Crisis, and a lot of people hate it, but I still have a soft spot for it. And primarily it's for Rags Morales, the artist on the book, who does every issue. You can point out 3 or 4 things that Meltzer, as an inexperienced writer of comics, is doing that don't really work for the medium. And then there'll be like a face that Rags draws on somebody, and you're like, that is going to stick with me the rest of my life. The way Rags draws evil archer Merlin painting his arrowheads black, like, stuck with me for 20 fucking years. The way fucking Tim Drake looks when he's trying to pull a boomerang out of his dead father's chest, and Batman's cape is enveloping him as if the entire fucking curse of Bruce's life is swallowing his ward in, who's like, he's suffering the same tragedy that Bruce suffered. Like, there's so many really good moments throughout the book, and it's all Rags' art. And he hasn't done a lot of other stuff since then. I mean, he worked on Action Comics with Grant Morrison during like the New 52, 2011 era. There's some good shit there. But his work on Identity Crisis is so good. Man, there's a sequence where, spoilers for a 20-year-old comic, where Tim Drake is in the car with Batman. He's trying to get home because his father, someone has broken into his father's home, is going to try to kill him. And one of the panels is Tim looking at Batman like through his little Robin mask. And he doesn't, I don't think he even says anything, but he's just like begging him to like, please, for the love of fucking God, get me there. And Bruce is just like, never again. Like he's just driving like a fucking bat out of hell. Like his entire thing is like, I have to protect people from their fucking parents getting murdered. And this kid has been fucking following me around for like 6 years. I got to stop his dad from dying. And he fucking fails. His dad dies. And it's just raw as shit. And there's so many good things in Identity Crisis. But then that led me to reading, Meltzer had like a 12-issue run on Justice League of America, where he writes the book identically to how he wrote Identity Crisis, but instead of Rags, it's Ed Benes is the artist, who was a little bit less good, not bad, but just like very different. And his arc's pretty good. It's underrated in my opinion, but it's not great. And then it ends up crossing over with Jeff Johns' Justice Society of America book in an arc called the Lightning Saga, where the Justice League and the Justice Society had to team up to discover that 7 members of the Legion of Superheroes from the 31st century are hidden in present day, and have to get them all together. And it's like this really kind of exciting story and mystery, and it's really fun. And then that led me into reading Jeff Johns' other stuff with the Legion. Like he did a pretty great arc with them in his run on Action Comics with Gary Frank drawing, where Superman, who used to hang out with Legion of Superheroes when he was a teenager, like they would come from the future to take him as a teenager to the future to hang out with them. He has to go back to the future to help them, but they're all adults now. He hasn't seen them since he was 15. And he gets to this future where like his memory has been like besmirched, and like everyone's like xenophobic and terrible, and he has to help out the grizzled, stubbly versions of Lightning Lad and Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl and all this stuff. And it's actually quite good. It's one of my favorite Superman stories. And then that kind of leads into some other Jeff Johns stuff. Like he did this big Legion of Three Worlds thing during Final Crisis. And then there's some follow-up after that was kind of good, I guess. But then that led me to reading Mark Waid's Threeboot era Legion, which I think he wrote, it was like 30 issues of or so, with him and Barry Kitson. It's one of my favorite Legion comics ever, one of my favorite comics ever, period. So I reread all that. It was pretty good. And then I was like, man, no one said anything cool with Legion in a while. And I remembered that Brian Michael Bendis, during his 3-year aborted stint at DC, had done a Legion book, and I went and read it, and it is god awful. It is one of the worst fucking things he's ever done in his career. And it's unfortunate because Ryan Sook is the artist in the book. I'm trying to think of other things you know Ryan Sook from. I think he worked on one of the like Seven Soldiers books for Grant Morrison and some other shit, whatever. But he draws this, and his art's pretty interesting. And some of the redesigns he does to make the Legion more diverse looking is cool. But Bendis is such dog shit at writing team books. He just... I screenshotted a page and sent it to my friend Cody, and I was like, he can't keep getting away with this. And Cody couldn't even zoom in because the entire page was fucking word balloons. There was no images. It was just people talking. And it's bad. There's a couple of things in the book that I guess are nice. Like I kind of like his characterization of Brainiac 5. But it's not good. Like it's just genuinely... I had a thing where I was enjoying Bendis' Superman run as it was being published. And I liked some of the other friends of his that got work while he was there, like them bringing in Matt Fraction to write Jimmy Olsen and stuff like that. And I was like, I never finished his Superman run, but I'll read the Legion thing and see if that'll make me wanna. And it did not. It actually destroyed me. I was like, this is so bad. And it ends up ending with like a crossover with the Justice League, because he later ended up writing the Justice League, and I couldn't read that at all. I could not read like the line. I could not read it. And you see all this stuff that he came up with kind of having to come to a head as a rush because he was leaving sooner than he planned. And it's some of the worst shit ever. It's like real like legacy staining type shit. And it really bummed me out because I love the Legion. I think there's one of the coolest superhero concepts. And Bendis just like did not fucking do it right. It just did not do it right. And it's really bad. And then that led me to like, I guess I had a conversation with Cody about Bendis and about when I was in like high school when he was writing the Ultimate Spider-Man books, how like different, fun, and cool they seemed at the time. And he's essentially never done anything else that good ever. I mean, he really kind of peaked with that stuff, I think. And that led me back to an issue of Wizard magazine where I saw an interview with Mark Millar about Mark had written a lot of stuff for the Ultimate Universe at the start, hugely influential in the MCU. And there was a point where they rebooted the Ultimate Universe, or relaunched it, I should say. And they called it Ultimate Comics, and every book was called Ultimate Comics blank. So instead of Ultimate Spider-Man, it was Ultimate Comics Spider-Man. Instead of the Ultimates, which is what they call the Avengers, they had Ultimate Comics Avengers. And Mark came back to write Ultimate Comics Avengers. I believe Carlos Pacheco was the artist, I think. And I forgot. I just mind wiped this for myself. I forgot that he had this idea that was like they hadn't done an ultimate version of the Red Skull. So Mark Millar's big idea was like, oh, in my universe, in the Ultimate Universe, the Red Skull is Captain America's son. And he has Captain America's powers. Like, Captain America knocked up his high school sweetheart before he went off to war. And then he died. And the government kept his child and raised it, like, in captivity, like fucking Homelander. And then that dude lost his shit when he was a teenager and, like, killed a bunch of military people and ran off. And he's essentially been the 20th century's greatest terrorist. And instead of having a red mask, he literally has cut his face off. Like, he cut off his father's face because it looked just like his father. And now he's the Red Skull. And he's like, Millar's pitch was like, imagine being Captain America and finding out your son is Osama bin Laden. And then I thought about how Mark Millar is a fucking multi-millionaire. He's one of the richest men in the history of comics. And I think he walked into an office and was like, what about this? And I can't do a Scottish accent, but it was, oh my God, I want to blow my brains out. It was so bad. So I reread that, and I forgot that Red Skull in that arc is like actually the least worst thing in it. I forgot that he also later creates like a black version of the Hulk, who's like a college professor who turns into the Hulk, but he speaks in Ebonics or what. I can't even, you know what? We all deserve better. We're not going to talk about it. We're going to skip that. But it did lead me to kind of have this feeling of like, how was he led astray? Mark Millar used to be cool. So then I read the first thing I'd ever really read of Mark Millar's. That's not true. The first thing I ever read of Mark Millar's was him and Grant Morrison co-wrote Aztec the Ultimate Man together when I was like 11. So I've read that. But I mean, the first real solo Mark Millar thing I ever read was he took over. He launched the book Ultimate X-Men. While Bendis was writing Ultimate Spider-Man and modernizing the Stan Lee Ditko Spider-Man stories for the modern era of 2002 or whatever, Bendis was also supposed to write the X-Men book, but he was like, I don't know how to write team books, so I can't do it. And they got Mark to do it instead. And what's funny is that Bendis never learned over the next 20 years. He would do team books, but he never figured it out. He just kind of lied to himself and us. But Millar did the first like 30 or so issues of Ultimate X-Men. And it's so much more radical. Like, so much of what Bendis was doing was just very straightforward. Like, what if Peter was 15 today? What would that look like? And he does a lot of really great stories with it. Some of the best Spider-Man comics in the history of Spider-Man comics. Ultimate X-Men is supposed to be more like brash and in your face and different and fucking edgy. Like, the first issue is that like Wolverine is actually with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and he only joins the X-Men to be a sleeper agent. And then he only wants to join the X-Men for real because he fucks Jean Grey, who it implies is actually a teenager, and Wolverine's like 100. And the first arc ends with Magneto on the White House lawn having George W. Bush naked licking his boots. And then Xavier kills Magneto, but then later he reveals that he didn't kill Magneto. He just wiped his mind, and Magneto is just living in New York as a teacher named Eric. And then in a later arc, Magneto comes back because Beast is getting catfished by the Blob from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and he lets slip the fact that Magneto's still alive. So then they go and revive Magneto, and then Magneto tries to kill everyone again. And Beast is only getting catfished because he's in a relationship with Storm, but Xavier's son Proteus has convinced him that Storm only likes him because Xavier is telepathically controlling her to like him for team dynamics. So Beast's insecurities get the best of him, and he ruins everything for the team. And then Cyclops tries to kill Wolverine because in the midst of this entire huge battle thing, Wolverine tries to kill Cyclops just so he can have Jean to himself, like legitimately tries to murder him. And I'm skipping over like 10 other things. But there's so many things that are just ridiculous and weird and bad. And the thing that makes them so interesting is like Mark Millar's dialogue is some of the worst in the comics history, because he has this thing where when he talks to people, or people talk to when characters talk to each other, he ends every sentence with like an insult. So someone will say something like, yeah, what do you think about that, meatball? Or like, oh yeah, you didn't know that I just used my powers on you, dummy, or idiot head, or like stinky breath. Just every dialogue exchange ends with like, yeah, fuckhead, or whatever. And it's supposed to be cool and edgy, but it's just weird because no one talks like that in America or Scotland. And if you've never read Ultimate X-Men and you have Marvel Unlimited, I implore you to see how far into the book you can get. If you can comfortably make it to Ultimate X-Men number 12, where Chuck Austin and Asad Ribic take over the book for 2 issues to tell a story of Gambit, if you can make it to that purple cover, you're a trooper. You're a fucking magnificent person, because it is rough. There's stuff in it that's cool. Adam and Andy Kubert are the artists in the first several arcs of the book, and they do a lot of really fun experimental work, but Millar was just on some other shit, man. And it just, I don't know, it really, on the one hand, it made me feel good about how far, I guess, comics have come in terms of like the modernity of comics, but it also bummed me out because I was like, man, I was in high school, I thought this was the coolest shit ever. And now I'm like, this is the epitome of cringe. But yeah, that's what I read this week. So we got room for one. I only have one question this week, and lucky for you guys, it's also about the fucking X-Men. So let's get into this shit. Here we go. Question from my homeboy Rob Secundus, one of my favorite people on the internet when it comes to like opinions about comics. I think he's very smart and knowledgeable, and like also very funny. Now that you're caught up on the Krakoan era, what story do you think would be most interesting / successful to adapt to the MCU? Which would be the most cursed? Rob, this is tough. It's tough work, Rob. I would say, okay, so here's the thing. The core idea of the Krakoan shit is like unadaptable for the MCU. I know some people argued that like because they've never done the X-Men, they can just introduce them as being like, oh, well, no one knew them because they were on Krakoa the whole time, and introduce them as the Krakoan era of the X-Men. But I personally believe that so much of what makes the Krakoan era special is that it is building on and in conversation with every other iteration of the X-Men. And there's things about it that are less meaningful or less interesting if this is their initial status quo. So much of like the whole idea of the resurrection stuff, that only makes sense if you've read, or not only makes sense, but to me only resonates if you've read decades of stories where the X-Men die and get brought back to life already, you know? So like, I like that meta element of it. So I don't know that any of it actually could happen in the MCU, but let's just say, assuming they do the X-Men and it's successful enough that at some point they can do these stories, what would be successful? Let's just say it that way. I would say that I sort of think, not the plot, but the tone. I think the tone of Leah's X Factor, like the vibe of the team and the tenor of the conversations and all that stuff, I think that would kind of fit in the MCU pretty naturally. I don't think they would have a movie that's like the plot of X Factor where they're like doing, you know, fucking solving mysteries and shit. But the general energy of her book, I think, would fit the MCU pretty well. You could say the same thing about the Exterminators too, even though like the actual plot, not necessarily, but like the vibe for sure. And then I think that some of the stuff in New Mutants would fit really well. Like the biggest tragedy to me of all the Krakoan stuff was like I'd read most of it, and then a week or two ago I went back and reread. I didn't go through and read all of Marauders, and I didn't go through and read all of the Excalibur stuff, but I read pretty much everything else, almost, I would say. So I went back to start reading the New Mutant stuff, because I read some of it at launch, but I kind of fell off when Hickman left, and I reread the Hickman stuff, and I forgot how much I loved the fun, kind of tongue-in-cheek tone he brought to just Adventures of Bobby and Sam. And I remember being like, why did we never get just a Bobby and Sam book? Like, I loved them in his Avengers run. I loved them in New Mutants. I love Bobby later in X-Men Red for sure. But like, assuming that you don't have to do an MCU thing where the core characters are the most famous characters, Bobby and Sam could easily live in the MCU, and the way that Hickman presented them they would fit right in, and they'd be people's favorite characters, and they would want to see more of them and stuff. So that type of shit, especially like when they interact with the stuff in space, like them with the Starjammers, them with the Shi'ar, like all that shit. Imagining the Shi'ar and the Starjammers and all those characters in sort of the backdrop of galactic Marvel that like James Gunn made with the Guardians movies, those characters in that kind of world, that is like a no-brainer to me. That would be like such a layup. But then in terms of what would be like insufferable, would be anything Ten of Swords related. Any Ten of Swords, all like anything with a Racco, any of that stuff is so like dense and rough and challenging that I could not. Like, I literally was just trying to think about anything that happens on like on Mars, on the Araco Council, where people are like, it's this really great mirror of the Quiet Council in Immortal X-Men, where they are just all backstabbing and kind of quietly being manipulative and political. That the other side of it is just Storm having like death matches every 20 minutes. How that entire world would not fit in the MCU. Just like Magneto crushing a motherfucker's head to death with his helmet, like could not fit in the MCU, you know? So, and to me, that's actually kind of a mark of like a good thing, I guess, not MCU related necessarily, but some of the best comic stuff is stuff that would not work as a movie or a television show or anything else. I finally caught up to Saga recently, and I love the fact that Brian K. Vaughan in interviews is like, we're making a comic and we're doing shit that you can only do in comics. We don't care if they ever make it a TV show or movie. We want this to be a good comic. And a lot of the best stuff in the Krakoan era to me is like that. Like, they're really good comic concepts. And when people tried to recreate Watchmen, so many of them were just trying to recreate edgy, dark superheroes and not tackling the limits of the medium the way Alan Moore and David Gibbons did. Do you know what I mean? And so yeah, fuck, I really want a Bobby and Sam movie. Anyone who cares about the New Mutants or Bobby and Sam and are listening to this in the comments, please tell me who you would cast as Bobby and Sam. I'm very curious. Because I'm seeing Bobby on the X-Men 97 show, and it's kind of a bummer that his characterization is so early in the character's life. It's not as exciting as like kind of the way he's written in the modern books, and I really like the modern Bobby. But yeah. Thank you. That was a really good question, Rob. Rob is a really cool guy. And hey, dude, I really appreciate you helping me on my catching up on Krakoan journey. You were indispensable, and I really appreciate that. Well, gang, that is the episode. That is it. We're out of here for a few weeks. If you are watching this on YouTube and you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up. If you loved it, please subscribe to the channel. And if you hit the little bell icon, you'll get notifications whenever I put out new content. We will be back with the pod every week in a few weeks. We will probably also hit the ground running with a video by then too, since you've definitely missed those. I know I have. And if you have any thoughts or things you want to share, put them in the comments below. If you have questions for future episodes, please leave those below. I really hope that when I come back from hiatus, I got a bunch of questions. So put as many questions as you want in the comments of this episode. I don't care how dumb they are, how short, how long, how whatever. I want a bunch of questions when I come back. I would treat the questions like cookies, and I'm Santa, and it's Christmas in July. And then if you're listening to this on, whatever podcast platform of your choice, thank you for listening to the show in audio form. Follow, subscribe, share, leave us reviews, all that cool stuff. Thank you guys all so much for supporting the show, listening to the show, and supporting me and my madness. We will talk soon.